Hey everybody, this is Chris Torrence over at Optum, and today got a guy that I've crossed paths with more times than I can count, especially in the last few years out on the conference circuit, and he's doing some really cool stuff. And one of the topics here that we like to talk about here at on the Similarity podcast is just kind of like seeing what companies like Alvys are doing. How people like Nick are, what are their thoughts on where the industry is today, where it's going. Want to learn a little bit about Nick today. So all the conversations Nick and I've had in the past have been kind of in passing at mainly conferences. So hoping to get to know Nick Darman a little more today. So Nick, thanks for making a little time on the first, as we said off camera, the first, I guess, official Monday where school's back in. And I think everyone's, if you didn't work last week, you're definitely back at the office today, man. So how are you doing?
Good, good. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah. How was your holiday?
It was busy. All
Yeah.
my in-laws were down in San Diego from Minnesota.
Oh, wow. So are they back home now then?
Some of them are.
So okay.
Still packing and about to leave this evening.
They may not want to leave. You're like Solana Beach, San Diego, right? So I can tell you, being in neighboring Chicago up in Minnesota, like as you've probably seen on some of the weather maps, not really a great day to be in certain locations. But you've been spared from Mother Nature as usual out there. So.
Oh, absolutely. And we're so blessed to live in San Diego. Some of us don't even know what's happening out there. But in reality, people are having a hard time, and with the type of weather we're experiencing now, I'm actually looking forward to see what's that going to do to the freight market.
Yeah, I mean, just right. It's interesting you say that. I mean, it was just kind of the timing, right? Like all that a lot of people have been out of, off and on for the last 2 weeks for the holiday, and today's like, of course, the first official day back, and Mother Nature decides to, just throw us a wild card. And I think if you're in logistics, Nick, to your point. People have probably been getting ahead of this, as you have to do, because products and shipments are still flowing. And of course, when you introduce a major weather event like this, and again, I'm not directly impacted per se in Chicago. We got a somewhat spared, but down throughout a lot of the Midwest and the East Coast, you're seeing, I think it's some record type of snowfall and ice, et cetera. So I'm sure all the operations,
entire central side of the United States, including Tennessee, Kansas, Missouri, all of those are impacted, and freight from Chicago goes south.
That's right.
And we're going to see some interesting disruptions in freight, and this is following the holiday season.
It's it's a lot. There's so much going on, and I know the holiday lull, people kind of check out for a bit, and as you noted, spend time with family. I had a great one myself, but like I said earlier, I'm glad to be back in the zone, the work zone, and but yeah, with all that's going on, Nick, I mean, it's too much to even ponder as far as the weather's just one topic, right? And if you're in our supply chain and logistics field, you're keeping an eye on the political realm and the transition of a new administration coming in. We've got potential tariffs. We've got it's a myriad of things going on. Port strikes. It's like, where do you even start, right? So, but only people that work in logistics supply chain we're so accustomed to like what's going to be thrown at us next, because as the backbone of commerce, as you know, right? We just have to figure out a way to adapt and overcome and make it work, man. So I know that you get that as much as anybody, and those people tuning in that are in our industry certainly can empathize. And again, that's the mindset we all have to have. So it's going to be an exciting year.
It's funny that you mentioned that we in logistics, we kind of have to have our ears open, our eyes to see. From my experience, I'm realizing we cannot predict anything long term. All we can do is just put one foot in front of the other and see what happens and what punch to take and move forward.
That's right, man. I've spent much of my earlier career in operations, and I remember getting called in on like Christmas Day. Why? Because it was weather, and it was preemptively saying, well, this product's got to get out. So I know you're with family, but this is the business. So you learn early on, like that's just kind of, you said it, man. We take a lot of punches, but that's what makes everybody in this industry. So we're very strong people, and we always find a way to make it happen. So Nick, kind of on that note, want to backtrack a little bit, man, because again, we've gotten to chat here and there at different events and conferences, and I know I'm going to see you probably out on the road here in 2025. But going back to before the Alvys adventure, I know you've been an entrepreneurial in the past, maybe a little finance background. I'm sure people go to your LinkedIn and kind of fill themselves in, but let's go all the way back to maybe when Nick was, I know you spent some time in school in Georgia, and maybe took a couple classes up at Cambridge and MIT, all cool stuff. But how does Nick Darman one day go, I'm going to get into this whole logistics thing? And really, like, we're talking about the freight tech side more recently, right? Software. Where does that interest initially start to peak in your head to go, I'm going to do something about it?
Well, it's a combination of multiple things that happened to me throughout the years that made me want to get into the tech side for freight. But my trucking and logistics experience, they go back to 2004 when I was at Georgia State. I
Hmm.
used to live in Atlanta, and my father was driving long hours, and I wanted to help him financially. And I told him, "Look, figure out how to buy a truck. I'll found a trucking company, and I'll be able to find loads." And back then, the DAT phenomenon, the load boards, it was new for a lot of people. But
Hmm.
I've heard about it from other folks in the industry. There's other family members like my uncles there in the industry, so I've heard about the low boards, and I was confident enough I would be able to get good enough freight from my dad, so he actually does much better financially. So that's kind of how I started. I was
So
at
yeah, and that's always find a special debt of gratitude for people that come up in this industry that have a background, especially one as personal as yours with father, uncle that have been in trucking. Because I feel like if you're brought up in that environment, you're exposed to the reality of how this business operates. And I think nothing against folks that come in from the outside the industry, but as you know and can attest all too well, and I think I have at this point, it's like it sounds really easy from an external perspective, right? Just move it from A to B, put it on a boat, a plane, a train, whatever, right? And you get into the front lines and you realize like it's just not that simple. So I want to again commend you for having that type of background and the familial connection there, because I think anyone that has that, like I said, that exposure is going to be way more well equipped to understand not just the possibilities, but also the reality of where the industry is. And you've kind of alluded that from over the years past, right? With the going back to the initial load boards and saying there's got to be a better way than just having to default to a load board all the time, right? So I'd love to hear more about when. So you're kind of learning the game. You've got some financial assistance from some successes that the family's had. So where's that? Are you sitting around one day going, "That's enough. I'm sick of it. I'm going to go make my own effort," or do you kind of have a different path to get to where you are today?
So, well, a combination of multiple things. I always wanted to work as a financial analyst, especially for a bank in New York. And
Yeah.
so, I said to myself, I'm going to help my dad while I'm in college.
Okay.
And I told him, look, for me to be able to do this, I will take my 10% dispatch fee from you, and I'll disperse 90% of income over to you, and I'll just do the dispatching services, which was helping me out as well, right? But
Sure.
my initial thought was just to help. It wasn't really to start a trucking company and grow the trucking company. But shortly after, I added a few more other owner operators that heard about my dispatch capabilities, and I figured, you know what, two or three more trucks is not gonna hurt. Little did I know that I'm gonna have some serious cash flow problems, because back
Sure.
then we didn't have, well, at least I didn't have factoring companies. Factoring company phenomena has actually become really big later on. Back then,
Hmm.
no one really knew about factoring companies. And so what I had to do, I had to manage my cash flow very strategically, because I was always out of cash. I would just go to the mailbox, wait for the check, and then every owner operator would actually be so angry at me, thinking, "Where is my money?" So
Yeah.
that's basically what I was experiencing, and that was while
Happy.
in
Yeah.
college.
Yeah.
And all my buddies, they were partying, having so much fun, and I was struggling here trying to get to my commitments, make sure that everyone is
Yeah.
loaded, while at the same time I need to pass my exams, right?
Yeah.
And then, so
It's a
it has
balancing
become
act. Yeah.
a balancing act. No cash. I'm depressed. Everyone
And
is
ironically,
calling.
you're working in the banking sector, right?
The
So
only person I
financial.
was able to actually postpone paying was my father, right?
Right.
The
Right.
rest of the guys I had to pay on time. So I had zero cash. I was thinking I was working so hard, for what? But
Right.
I had this commitment. But in the process, I learned a lot of different tricks. As soon as I graduated, I basically told everyone, hey guys, trucking was just something I wanted to do temporarily, and now I'm ready to find another job and become a financial analyst. So I moved to New York. It was in 2008. It was a bold move because obviously
Oh, 08 was a heck of a year to move to Wall Street. Yeah.
yeah, everyone was getting laid off, let
Yeah.
alone getting a job there, right?
Yeah.
So I still landed a job at JP Morgan,
Hmm.
spent there for, I think, about 2 years or so. And while at JP Morgan, I learned many different things, including management styles, because
Hmm.
obviously you deal with so many different styles in management. There
Sure.
are so many different groups, right? And I also learned how different data and a lot of data interacts with different systems and
Hmm.
where the shortcomings are. In addition, I learned a lot of accounting because I had to do a lot of reconciliation. I had to reconcile the balance sheet for the front traders that actually traded asset-backed securities and mortgage-backed securities.
Right.
And so there were a lot of things that were thrown at me in those 2 years. But as I was working there, I realized I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I understood that what I'm doing is very important, but at the same time was just one thing in the grand scheme of the whole thing. And my brain is just not operating well when I have to do a standalone or something in silo. I
Yeah.
need to be able to see a complete picture. And by the way, many people love to operate in silos. I
True.
wasn't that person. I wasn't getting enough motivation. I liked the fact that when I was dispatching for those owner operators while being in college, I'm
Hmm.
able to talk to the broker. I'm negotiating a price. Now I'm fulfilling this load.
Right.
The owner operator is delivering the load. I'm collecting the paperwork. Then
Yeah.
I'm invoicing the customer. Then I have to pay the owner operator. I had to do this end-to-end complete workflow. So that's
Sure.
how my brain is wired, and when I see that end-to-end workflow, I become very efficient by nature. When I was at JP Morgan, I had to do just one thing over and over again, and I don't want to get into details, but long story short, I decided to go back in trucking since
Hmm.
I've acquired my experience in trucking while dispatching for my dad and other owner operators. I thought, you know what, this time around, I'm going to do a much better job. I will actually grow and scale the company. And I was confident that I'll do it quickly. But I also knew in order to do it quickly, I needed to have the right system or right processes. So I wasn't sure exactly how I was going to develop those processes, whether using combination of multiple technologies or spreadsheets. But that was my thing. I learned at JP Morgan how to do and process a lot of data at
Yeah.
scale. And I was going to replicate that same process in logistics space while scaling the business. So I basically jumped in, started a trucking company, started with owner operators again, and slowly bought trucks, have become a broker, became a hybrid operations where you're basically an asset-based freight
Hmm.
brokerage. And later on, towards the end of my career in trucking, and I'm still in trucking, but
Right. Right. I get it. Yeah. Yeah.
business operations,
Sure.
the company was only a freight brokerage.
Gotcha.
And so while growing the business, I switched 4 different systems, 4 different TMSs. And I had a lot of haters. A lot of my employees hated me for that. But at the same time, I just didn't want to give up. In other words, just because I wasn't able to find the right system the first time, I'll be able to find it the second time. Second time around wasn't good enough. Third time wasn't good enough.
Kept
Fourth time.
iterating. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe what I'm looking for doesn't exist.
Is that
So
the aha moment? Like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So maybe I'm delusional, right? And I was actually delusional, to be honest with you. I didn't think it's that difficult to build a proper system. So until I started to build my own.
There we go. There, yeah.
Then reality hit me hard, right? First, I was thinking first 10 modules, easy peasy, everything is
Sure.
great. And I'm thinking, what are these people doing when they're building the systems? It's supposed to be so easy. And then
Right.
module number 11 comes
That's right.
and everything breaks.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, what's going on? Then module 12 takes as long as it took 11 modules to build.
Yeah.
That's when everything is starting to slow down. And when
Right.
you do this for years and you add more employees, more engineers, and you keep on pouring money and you're just starting to move like a turtle, I'm thinking to myself, well, by the time I realize my dreams or the vision for the company or for the technology, I'll be 500 years old. That's
Sure.
just
Yeah.
not good enough for me, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of that's my learning experience while building technology, proprietary technology for my logistics company. But I saw the writing on the wall, and I tried to be honest with myself. And one of the interesting components or elements as an entrepreneur, the faster you become honest with yourself, the faster you realize where your shortcomings are. And once you understand your shortcomings, that's when you can make the right decisions fast. The problem,
Well
and
said.
I was one
Yeah.
of those people. I thought I'm so confident. I thought I know it all, right? And I was burning through cash. Guess what? Cash has, it's not prejudice. It doesn't see color,
No,
doesn't see skin, doesn't see nationality. It just sees a lot of your mistakes. And if
that's
you
right.
are making a lot of mistakes, you're going to be out of cash. Or if you make the right decisions, you know what? You're going to generate cash.
Yeah.
So cash teaches entrepreneurs to become real with themselves, and the faster entrepreneurs become honest with themselves, that's when they could actually create great things.
I think Nick,
So
that's. I want to commend you again for having that realization that on a lot of levels, right? Just the sheer level of the ideation of this sounds fairly simplistic. You've got a
yeah,
background in finance and numbers guy, like you got the exposure to trucking in your mind, right? You have this idea of this is going to be fine. And then, as you just noted, right, you get into it and it starts to incrementally, and then at some point, it's wow, maybe I underestimated a few of the challenges drastically, and I think that's common, right? But the one thing you said, Nick, is you had the ability to recognize that I know my strengths, but I'm also very self-aware enough to know I've made some bad decisions, or maybe I'm not the right person to fit this particular function, and bring in some folks that maybe fill the void for me. I think that's the one thing as a startup guy who's been in the game for freight tech game. That is a key quality and attribute that I find in founders that is always, in my view anyway, like perhaps near the top. And the reason I say that is because you hear the expressions of the drinking the Kool-Aid, and how many founders will literally drive the train into the wall, and you look back and you go, "Gosh, all the signs were there."
yeah,
And had you had this moment of clarity to say, maybe I don't know it all, right? Maybe I need to stop and do some self introspection, right? And again, whether it's I'm going to just take external advice and surround myself with people that seem to know these areas better than I, then that's a testament to any leader, I think. And again, I just want to commend you as that's a quality I don't often see. Everybody's riding high when things are good, high fiving, right? But when times get tough, that's where an entrepreneur gets that spirit gets tested. And I think it takes a certain personality and a type that it can acknowledge that. And again, I just want to give you credit for that. I don't see that often.
I appreciate it. And again, I don't even know how I got that insight, but I knew I needed to find the right person to partner up with,
Yeah.
the person that knows how to build industrial grade platforms.
Right.
And that's how I found Leo, who's
Hmm.
currently our co-founder and CTO of Alvys.
Hmm.
And together we partner up and embark on this journey to disrupt or develop or deliver a system
Right.
that is very much needed in the market, but the market didn't yet have the pleasure to have it. That's kind
Right.
of if I were to put it in these terms. And so that was 2020, and that's what led me to found Alvys. It was through multiple iterations of building my proprietary technology.
Hmm.
Realize that just because you have some money and engineers, that's not enough. You need
Yeah.
principled approach to engineering, but you also need people who know what they're doing on the front line, and not
Right.
only that they need to know what, or not only that you don't only need to have the experience on the front line as much as have your mind or brain be wired in a holistic, complete end-to-end solution. At the beginning of our podcast, I mentioned that my brain operates as an end-to-end I guess, paradigm. And
Yeah.
if I don't have that, I'm not able to be effective.
You need to see the whole picture. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's when I'm able to actually execute, slowly in every department to be able to deliver things efficiently. And I took that as a sign that I need to become an entrepreneur. I need to actually start a trucking company, but I didn't just want to create a trucking company for the sake of making money. I actually enjoy developing different processes and become very, efficient and effective.
Yeah.
And so I knew in order to compete in today's world, you need the right systems, or you need to have, a right platform to be able to manage things at scale.
Yeah.
What I was looking for didn't exist. I burned through millions of dollars, realized I made a mistake thinking that I'm going to be able to do it myself under my management skills. So when it comes to technology, went to look for the right partner, found Leo Gorodinsky, and we
Mhm.
had a lot of good synergies. And we partner up. That's how Alvys was born in 2020. That
2020. Good time to get into it, I guess, on some level, right? But never a bad time per se, right? There's other external factors and variables we have no control over, markets, et cetera. But I would say 2020 was certainly after we got through the initial pandemic shock, and we started to kind of realize, like, hey, this is their supply chain never stops. And how
yeah
do we, how we saw a tremendous amount of capital, and from venture capital and private equity and investment in general started in my 25 plus years in this industry. Nick, I've never seen a frenzy in my space quite like we saw in 2020.
yeah
Your Tell us about Alvys, the name, right? Because I think that I just want to at least start. Some people may go, how do what's the story behind Alvys, the name Alvys?
oh yeah so I like I said, I like efficiency, and I
Yeah.
like to spend the least amount of money and get the largest bang on what I spend. So my first thought process was the name has to be short,
Yeah.
and I should be able to have access to .com
Okay. Yeah.
one way
Yeah.
or another, right?
Yeah.
So whether I'm going to acquire it, but it has to be short, and I have to have the .com extension. Second part, I wanted the name to start with an A,
Okay.
because
On a
uh,
search,
you
right?
know
Alphabetical.
I was bootstrapping everything. I was
Yeah.
self-funding everything, and to me, I don't have VC money to burn through marketing. I just need to actually get the most I can by just listing the company, and let the company be first
Hmm.
in a chronological order. So that's the second part. The third part, I wanted to have some kind of meaning. And the meaning, Alvys, if you actually type it in Google, it means acting wise. So it's a boy's name that signifies wisdom, where you act wisely. So I
Okay.
like to say that Alvys acts wisely in the background while you
I
run your
like it.
operations.
Oh, and that I like that third part. That was the one I was going for. What is the meaning? And right, I could have done a Google search, but is that cultural, Nick? Is that a name that don't hear the name in terms of like in the States anyway? You don't hear that name too often, except your organization. But does that tie back to your ancestral roots or culturally? Is that kind of where it goes, or are you just completely random?
Yeah, so I was driven by efficiency in how I'm going to spend my marketing.
Yeah,
So it has to be short, it has to be with an A, and then I started to look for something that has meaning.
got it.
And that's
Check
basically,
the
I'm
boxes.
just
Yeah.
I'm just being totally honest. That's how.
No,
And
I like it. It's one of those simple questions people don't often ask. But I was at Four Kites or whatever years, and people are like, "What is why? What's that name?" Right? And we had to come up with like, "Oh, no one's really asked us." So it's kind of like it makes the founder go like, "How did we come up with that?" So kind of trivial in some way, but as a founder, and it's your company, it's your brand.
yeah,
I'm glad you did put some thought behind it.
and
So
then there's another there's a fourth element to it.
okay,
It's the way we pronounce it. So
right,
most of the English speaking people would tend or lean to pronounce it Alvys,
Elise, yeah,
because you have an Y.
right,
Whereas I was telling everyone, no, we're going to pronounce it Alvis. I wanted
yeah.
to sound like Elvis. And we like to say what Elvis did to rock and roll is what Alvis is doing to
All
truck.
right. Well, that adds a whole nother layer to it. I like it. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
correct. So this is why when you actually type in alvis.com with an I, alvis.com, you'll see that it directs to Alvys. And people are asking
Right.
me, hey, why don't you just change it with an I? That way no one gets confused in pronunciation. And I always like to say, well, it looks different. It
Yeah.
flows different with an Y. It's unique, right? And we just want to stand out, but we want to pronounce it out. So that's
Hey,
that's that's the
I
idea.
could relate Optum with the Y, right? And
Yeah,
and again, I don't know, we Lyft, right? Like the Y became very prevalent when startups got there, and you wanted to spell it, but you had to be a little unique, maybe because the domain was taken, right?
yeah.
Or it was a ubiquitous term. And so, yeah, I think the letter Y in particular has definitely gone further than anyone expected in terms of company names in startup land. So,
Absolutely.
Nick, one other thing, I think you were in Chicago here for the JOC Inland Distribution Conference, and I think I saw a bit you did with someone on that side at the Journal of Commerce. And what I really took away, Nick, in that interview is you were talking about the importance of, yes, you have to have technical prowess and strength on the engineering, the dev side, no question. But I
Hmm.
really like that you're talking about just that frontline operational experience. That is equally important because you can code, but if you don't have context or understand the why and just the sheer amount of nuance and constraints and just the reality of how the trucking and logistics industry works, how many times have we seen where you look on pedigree type people of from a technical perspective and it doesn't work out and you're going, well, maybe these trucking guys know more than we gave them credit for. So again, how did you come to that realization early just from your background of growing up in that, or were you tempted to kind of go, hey, I'm just going to get some really smart technical people, I feel like I know enough to kind of drive the roadmap? Or did you all along say this will never work unless I have true practitioner input to make sure that I'm validating all my assumptions are really, again, the validation process of would this work? And it's not something that's like a binary answer, right? You kind of figure that out as you're going. But like, is that something that you just felt was innately part of that plan when you started Alvys, or does it just something a hard lesson learned and you're like, oh, we got to bring in some practitioners?
Well, to me, when you say practitioners, you're talking about people that have, real experience in logistics, right?
Exactly, domain experience.
Yeah,
Yeah,
domain experience. I So first of all, I thought that I would be able to build to build technology without having experienced folks that know how to build technology in the cloud. Because
right.
the cloud, when I started in 2017, the cloud was a new phenomenon still, especially in logistics space.
Sure,
And so it takes different skill sets for engineers to build in the cloud versus when they build on-prem. That's
you
just
bet.
bottom line.
You bet.
And so logistics space at that time didn't really have a lot of engineers that have logistics experience, all while building in technology in the cloud.
Rare
So
breed.
yeah, all of those.
And the most in demand people I find in the market is just, do you have technical skills and domain experience? Like in our industry, I feel like that is every recruiter I know and people in the headhunting space, that's the magic formula. But yeah, keep going.
Yeah. But then the way I came to this realization that you definitely need to have folks that know what they're doing, and you have to be on the front line, is by dealing with different TMSs. And
Yeah,
every time I'm talking to them, I'm realizing the reason they're not able to connect the dots has to do with the fact that they don't understand what's happening on the front line. So that was my realization. After switching 4 different platforms, I'm realizing they're just taking feedback and they robotically program things based on the feedback. But if that feedback wasn't properly communicated, in
right,
other words, if the feedback has 10 points, yet you needed to bring out 30 points, then you still fall short. And
right.
the person who's actually delivering that feedback doesn't even know they're actually falling short when it comes to
That's
communication,
right.
right? And then you go back and forth, and it's becoming a mess. That's my so my discovery at that point was, okay, the reason why no one has created what I was looking for has something to do with the fact that most of the folks in the space don't actually have real life experience. You will even find folks that have actually been at larger corporations,
Mhm.
like massive corporations in logistics space, but that's not what I was looking for. I was a small company, and so I was looking for someone that understands what's happening in small to mid-size operations.
Yeah,
Running a JB Hunt is very different than running a smaller operations
You
that's
bet.
under 100 million in revenue. That's the reality.
That's
And
right.
so a lot of these platforms, they claim, oh, I have experience. Let's just use the name JB Hunt. I have experience from JB Hunt. I was a director of JB Hunt. So what can you actually do to help a carrier that has only 50 trucks? Nothing.
Right.
All that
Well, and
freight.
they may have good ideas, but you're right. It's all relative. And I think
Exactly.
that's the
You're
key.
not helping the small to mid-size operations, because JB Hunt or large mega carriers, they operate differently because
Yeah,
they have a lot of freight. So all you have to do a lot of matching with the freight that you currently have. Whereas when you're a smaller to mid-sized company, you don't have the luxury to have all the freight you want.
that's
So you
right.
have to mix and match different opportunities. So it's a very different game. And how do you actually apply the technology that actually works for those folks? So, anyways, long story short, that's my discovery. People don't understand exactly what's happening on the front line. And then I was confident I'm going to be able to show every engineer, doesn't matter of their experience, I will be able to tell them how the product is supposed to run, and we're going to be able to build.
Sure.
And that's when I realized I was wrong. So you cannot have just the frontline experience without someone who knows how to build industrial grade
Yeah.
platforms, especially in the cloud, because you need to compete with the Amazon of the world,
Yeah.
right? And in order to compete with the Amazon of the world, that doesn't happen on technology that's built on prem.
Yeah.
It only happens on technology that's built in the cloud. Because we live in a world of connectivity today.
You
And so,
bet.
so things have changed big time. So from that perspective, that's when it hit me hard. Now I go, well, in order to recover all the millions of dollars that I actually find and spent for this technology, in order for me to be able to make sense of this, I actually need to find the right person. So while you asked me that people you asked me the question, how did you come to this realization that you need to have folks that have the frontline experience? Well, in our company, I am that person. I
Yeah.
am the person that had one truck. I am the person that had 50 trucks, 100 trucks. I am the person that has processed thousands of loads as a broker a
Hmm.
month, right? So I was able to actually see every step of the way on the front line.
Yeah.
So I have a general idea, a good understanding as to what's going on when I hire people, whether they're in product, especially back then.
Hmm.
I could already feel whether they know what they're talking about or not.
Right.
So that's just the beginning phase, right? And so that's the frontline experience. But what's more important is whether you have the experience building industrial grade platforms in the cloud.
Right.
And if you only have those folks without people that have the frontline experience, you're also going to fall short.
You bet.
So the two have to happen. And this was my aha moment. This is probably why this type of technology I'm looking for was never built before, is because these two school of thoughts, so to speak, were never married.
Yeah.
Right?
It
That's
happens a lot, right?
yeah, yeah.
You see Silicon Valley types when they got into our industry, right? Technically just brilliant, but they lacked the domain expertise and just the experience that we've all seen that clearly allows all of us in this industry to know it's not as easy as it may look from the outside. But to your point, I think there's also this mindset in some of the more traditional old school thought, right? We can just force fit this into a spreadsheet and we know trucking, we know logistics. We've never invested in IT or infrastructure. Certain, a lot of, we still see it today, Nick, right? How many of these companies are still operating on? I did a piece last year on the AS400, still alive and well. And I think it's, again, to your point, I'm in the same school of thought, Nick. How do you bridge and harmonize and balance what people bring in terms of the human brain and the lessons they've learned as the tribal knowledge, et cetera, and then somehow apply that, digitally speaking, and transform that into technologies and platforms and software that kind of can take that baton from them and enable them to do exactly what they're good at: exceptions management, the sales and business dev stuff you know well, and allow as technology's caught up, start transitioning some of those repeatable, mundane tasks to the technology. But you're right. If you don't have that right engineering, the architects, the developers, the product folks, it will fall short. We've seen that time and time again. So again, the all encompassing, in my opinion, is again that you got the people aspect, the processes, you got the technologies. How do you, a good leader to me can somehow bridge all of those and make them kind of put that puzzle together and make it, that 1 + 1 is 3 when you can perfect all those three vantage points of building an organization.
Well, and this, I actually, so one of the reasons why a lot of people are still using spreadsheets and manual processes is because they probably have been burned in the past, and they
Oh yeah,
heard a lot of promises from different technology providers. But what those technology providers, are promising? They're promising, I want to say, the future. They're promising something
yeah,
that's going to be revolutionary. But
right,
in order to build that, that's so difficult.
yeah,
It takes, one thing is to build a product that's in silo. Uh,
hmm,
it's much easier to manage that product, deliver to the market. But in logistics space, when you are adopting a product that's operating in silos, I argue that sometimes is creating more friction than efficiency.
yeah. That's been
And
proven. Yeah,
yeah, and how do you break those silos
yeah,
and bring them all together and deliver that unified end-to-end solution?
yeah,
And that's when a lot of folks fall short. And this is why you need those Silicon Valley principal approach to engineering,
yes,
proper product people. And by the way, that's another interesting discovery I made when it comes to product. At first I thought the only product people that are valid in this industry are those that have logistics experience. Because what can they build when it comes to logistics? They need to understand the space. True, they do need to understand the space. But when it comes to proper product
yeah.
people,
There's a
you
methodology
have
behind
to
just that.
be able to manage the engineers in such a way where they actually deliver that product. And apparently, the good talent sometimes doesn't have the logistics experience.
Right.
So how do you combine? You have to be able to. It's a puzzle that you need to solve, and it goes back to what I said in the beginning. In logistics, you can't predict anything long term. You have to basically put one foot in front of the other and listen carefully. Don't be stubborn. Be able to pivot quickly. Same.
Yeah, it's a conundrum though, Nick.
Yeah,
And again, I've worked with some academics in the last few years, even now, right? And that I always say, and I've said this several times, right? And there's a theoretical understanding of how things should operate. We
yeah,
get that in theory. And mathematics, right? I do a lot of mathematical modeling, and it's an optimization company. You guys have some elements of that, right? There is the theoretical of this is how it should work, but the reality is, it's not that practitioners that have been in this game for a while don't understand that. It's that there's a big gap, a big delta between what's theoretically possible in due time. And you said it right. A lot of tech vendors are selling the future, and I don't think they're necessarily wrong. But the fallacy is assuming that we don't, when you're building and scaling a startup, a SaaS company, right? You can't, that's roadmap, that's good marketing, but
yeah,
your users expect to get functionality and some ROI, some quantifiable, measurable ROI today. And I
yeah.
think that's where I see a lot of folks, and maybe you and I may not agree on this one, Nick. I know TMS, and I've been in that game, right? You say end to end, and there's silos. You're right. You're 100% right. Then that does create friction. But when you talk about end-to-end workflow management, which is a lot of the TMS functionality, right? I think
Hmm.
as a SaaS company, where it can get derailed is trying to be everything to everybody. And when you're, again, you're looking to hyperscale, right? So what is that when you're trying to find PMF on something? And I think that's the debate that the founders debate, right? To harden product or keep innovating, and how do you balance that? And I think that's where I see an opportunity just like you do, and I think I want to kind of pivot into the fact that you went into the side of the coin that's often very underinvested, in my opinion, which is the carrier world, right? The shippers have multiple options because that's where the money and the revenue's at. But when you go to the carriers and you basically break down what that carrier profile looks like, and you and I both know, right? The vast majority are those guys that have what, maybe I don't know what it is, 6-10 trucks is probably the average size fleet, and that's an underserved market and then some. and they don't have IT departments. They don't have budgets. They may not have the know-how. They know how to run their trucks, but they lack a lot of the tools that I think that have been around. But if I don't have budget to afford the enterprise grade tier one carrier centric TMS, and I think there's probably two that have been around for a while, you and I know, one's kind of on the up and up now. But I think maybe this is where Alvys said, hey, there's a huge opportunity for us to go a little further downstream, SMB, mid-market, that long tail I alluded to, and service that side of the house versus trying to go after the mega fleets like so many of the premier TMSs that have legacy, traditional, whatever you say, they've done well. But how do you, Nick, go and say, I'm going to go into a market that's been underserved. I understand there's risk. And I'm not trying to build maybe what the mega fleets want, but I'm trying to, in my mind, I'm going, does that start with one key solution that gets them excited and starts, your user metrics go up? Or did you approach it like, hey, we are going to scale back some of these big ones that you don't have budget for anyway, but you got to graduate from the Walmart, off the shelf product you bought years ago that's clearly not doing the trick and prohibiting you from growing your business. How did you rectify and reconcile all that in your head as you're learning these lessons in the process?
Yeah. So before I answer this question, I kind of wanted to go back to one point you mentioned before, where a lot of people are pouring so much money and they still fall short. Mm-hmm. And to your point, let's take two examples, Amazon and Walmart. Do you think Walmart doesn't have the money to build the right technology? They could hire anyone they want, and they could build anything they want. But guess what? It's not about money, and it's not about having the ability to hire anyone you want. You need to have the right culture.
Yeah.
You need to have the right mindset. You need to have strong conviction that what you're building will actually help the end user. It comes from top down, and yeah. To me, when I was asking a lot of people, hey, I'm thinking to spun off the proprietary tech into a separate technology company, everyone told me, Nick, do not do this because you're gonna lose. Do you know how many people tried this? Everyone has lost. And that's when I knew, you know what? Just because no one was able to figure out, it doesn't mean the need disappeared. Yeah. It's not about money. It's about actually helping. And what's greater vision in our space than helping the carrier that we all, as shippers, freight brokers, rely on?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, you know what? I will go and do that. And to go back to my roots back then, because I'm from Moldova originally.
Yeah.
I came to the United States when I was 15 in 1996. I remember my dad used to force me. He used to force me to go to a music school, and so I just didn't like going to a music school. I was thinking, Dad, this is not for men. I want to do boxing. I want to do sports. Like why? And my dad's like, no. While you live in my house, you're gonna do what I tell you to do. So, anyways, I ended up going to a music school. I never wanted to play any piano.
It's not too late, Nick. It's not too late.
But this is my point. When my teachers would ask me, so what piece do you want to play on your exam so we could at least give you a C, so you pass, right? Because your parents are paying for music school. I was like, okay, let me choose the piece and I'll play it. And to their surprise, every time I would choose the most difficult piece. Yeah. I would not play the whole thing because I don't have the time. I had no appetite to learn the whole thing. But I would actually play 3 or 4 lines.
Mm-hmm.
And to a lot of people, they would be amazed. How is it that this kid never plays anything and he just takes the most difficult piece and he's actually playing it flawlessly? Yeah. So there is something about me where I go
brain's wired that way.
What's more difficult.
Yeah.
I go for, if someone tells me that you're not going to be able to do it, well,
it fuels the fire. Yeah.
If the vision is big enough.
Yeah.
If I'm actually helping the carrier, the people that are on the front line, and I was that person, and I know how much these carrier owners work. I know that they don't have
you witnessed it.
Family. Yeah, it's like they're just going around the clock. First, they start with American Dream. Next thing you know, 5 years later, they're still working till 11 p.m. They're trying to solve all of their problems, and no one really knows about it. We all think, oh, this is entrepreneurship, fair game. Well, a lot of times when you start into trucking, you don't even realize what you're getting, what you're signing up for. That's the reality.
Maybe you have learned that lesson for better or worse, Nick. You know that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's basically, to me, it's very important for us to be mission driven.
Yeah.
What are we trying to solve? While there's shippers, freight brokers, and carriers in the middle mile space that we're solving, I honestly believe if we solve for the carrier, the
Yeah.
most important component in our logistics space, I believe we're going to be able to help supply chain,
Yeah.
broadly, and everyone is going to benefit. And that's what I'm going after. It's not even about
Absolutely.
making, a big buck. It's about delivering something that's difficult to build. Now, to get back to the question that you ask, at which point do you go to market? Because
Yeah.
obviously, if you go too early, that's not viable. Like, carriers
Not
are they
sustainable.
don't need.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So at which when do you go to market? Well, I had the luxury to self fund the company. I was in VC backed, so I was
At the
testing
time. There
at
was
the
some news earlier, the 24 that changed
yeah.
that trajectory a bit. Yeah.
At the time, so I didn't have any customers. I
Yeah.
only had few customers that were actually willing to take the risk. But at the end of the day, I wasn't going for customers. I was trying to iterate the technology for many
Yeah.
years, starting with 2017, while it was proprietary, until 2020, and then
Hmm.
after 2020 up until 2022, I only had about 10 customers that I
Yeah.
was iterating for them, back and forth. I didn't charge them a penny, back and forth, back and forth. Customers that had 100 trucks, freight brokers, 20 trucks. And so I was doing all kinds of testing, before going to market. So I knew that when I would go to market in 22, it would still not be perfect.
Right. I'm not sure perfection and software are ever two words used in the same sentence, right? So,
Yeah. It would not be perfect. It's just,
yeah.
but we're going for something that's big. We're going for something that
Hmm.
hasn't been built before. So I didn't want to be distracted by venture capitalists by demanding revenue. And so
That's part of that game, right? That's
yeah,
the board, you know?
when you go to market too early
Yeah.
for something that's as difficult as the proper TMS, and by the way, just because there's a lot of noise in our in our space, that doesn't mean the carriers or the freight brokers have what they actually need. They
Yeah.
just go to any company, and you'll realize they're using so many additional tools. Sometimes they're so lost and they're so used to those processes, to a point where the owners are actually afraid to let people go because they don't even know how these processes work
Yeah.
anymore, right? It's
Yeah.
crazy. It's a liability if you think about
Absolutely.
it.
We've seen that too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
bizarre. To me, that's bizarre. If you're afraid to let people go because those are the people that know your processes,
Yeah.
that's a problem. So how do we make something different at Alvys? How do we make sure that everyone benefits, not just the employees where they take pleasure in the way technology is built, but also the owners that are able to drive these companies to the next levels and
Yeah.
are giving their employees a different opportunity to grow, because it
Yeah.
has to be. So that's basically what we've done. We didn't go to market early enough. We built many modules that had to be intertwined together before we went to market.
Yeah.
After we felt it's somewhat ready, that's when we hit the road in 2022, I believe.
Yeah.
Roughly.
Well, and again, I'm going to commend you again for taking that stance of, hey, like, timing is everything, and if you're premature to market, you don't have a highly differentiated product. At the time, you're like you kind of a lot of people underestimate that you hear this ecosystem, like the integration aspect. Like, okay, great, we have a cool product. How do we feed and fuel this engine, this platform? And then you start getting into, oh my gosh, we're going to have to play with numerous other trading partners and vendors, and the problem starts to get exponentially more difficult. So the fact that you spent time early on and had a cohort, we'll call it, or consortium of, say, 10 customers that had somewhat of a similar profile, probably some different nuance in there, just to kind of stretch what the limitations were and what your mindset was at the time, that has ultimately proven to benefit you. And as we go back and look at your post from the 2024 recap. I mean, you guys, I think it was what, 3x growth.
Yeah.
You got 20 million bucks, a few pennies here and there, something like that, right? You had a huge increase, 22% increase on load volume on your customers, the partnership strategy, the integration we talked about. Nick, like I said, it sounds like, at least right now, as we head into 2025, you guys are on a good trajectory, man. So I think that I guess that goes back in your testimony here of the steps that you took, and acknowledging it, that there were a lot of missteps. And I think every entrepreneur, whether they admit it or not, there's absolutely a lot of missteps. There's just no way to avoid that, right? But I think you've probably, you've done the approach, I think, that more folks should consider before they go out and go on this, road show and trying to raise all this capital with merely an idea. And I think that your testament here is hopefully going to reinforce that, get a little further down the road before you really hit the market hard, right?
Yeah, but not a lot of people have the luxury to do so.
Good point.
Which is the reason why they just have an idea, they go and raise. When we raised, we already had a very mature technology platform.
Ideal. Yeah.
Not many customers, and so
right.
Some of the and we first time we raised seed capital, which was in end of 22. I forgot, 2022. Basically, the worst time to raise capital.
Yeah. Multiples weren't quite going what they've come back down to earth, right? Yeah.
And I was clear. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to take dilution, guys.
Yeah.
You guys, if you don't believe in what we're building, then you're not my partner. It's
right.
Very simple. Let's make it clear. We built a massive infrastructure here, and for a good reason. Because you're going to be able to see how we're going to generate customers given the infrastructure that we have.
Right.
And so obviously, those that partner up with us, they actually reap the benefit.
Bought in. Yeah.
Right? They're like, okay, there is something about this guy, because it's really hard to raise. No one is giving those multiples that I'm demanding. And I said, well, if I'm not getting these multiples, I'm going to keep on financing it.
Yeah. Well, and again, there's some element that is a luxury, right? But there's also a well-calculated play there that I think a lot of founders, especially first-time founders, you just get caught up in this limelight of raising, capital. And I think we've learned that there's nothing wrong with raising capital.
No, right? Absolutely not.
It's the deployment of that capital, and then the term sheets and the cap table aspect, right? You have to, and that's where you, Nick, have to wear that hat, right? And go, there's always there can be a consequence or repercussion of getting ahead of yourself and just getting caught up in the sum of money raised versus the implications and applications of, like, across your organization and just your financial future. All that kind of has to be really thought out well. So I commend you for doing that at a time where I think a lot of folks were probably running out of cash and the runway's getting, shorter and shorter. And unfortunately, they're put into some toxic financing situations and hoping they recover. But I mean, again, you go back and you ask those founders, and I'm being hypothetical, but, like, what would you have done different? I think they would have probably said, Nick Darman, if you listen to this, like, I think that was probably the way I should have done it in retrospect.
Well, if I were to answer that same question, I would definitely say, if you don't have the money and you depend on venture capitalists, make your product very narrow, and to your point, make it standalone. Don't play games by going wide. I went wide because
that's what's interesting. I feel like going wide can be a kiss of death because again, I'm thinking only and strictly from a VC-backed SaaS model. So build that mousetrap, even if it's not that much, slightly better, it's more economical, the users love it. If you start there, then all of a sudden you have their attention, they're adopting it. Even if in your mind it's like, and we talked about this, Nick sees, I see the big puzzle. I want to put it all together, end to end, right? But how do you go from, you got at some point revenue has to get generated. You have to get market penetration adoption. And I guess this is like, we can agree to disagree. I just feel like in my mind, I've learned that lesson of trying to be everything to everybody. And then you're in the back end in a corner, customizing everything for those first few customers. And it just starts to like, is this truly scalable? And I think that's where and I used to think just like you, man, but after being in the TMS world, I started to realize this is a massive undertaking. And I think that's where for me personally, Nick, just me, I like to find what is that one thing that I can get you to go, I'll use this every day and I'll pay to use this every day. And then from there, Nick, what else can you do for me? Right? Their appetite is a little bit more that they're disarmed. You've proven something. And then you can start to scale out different products, functions, features from there to build what I would say it ultimately is that a true like TMS, WMS, can be any massive piece of systematic software, right? But I'm open. I'm all ears, man. You said you took you were thinking bigger and decided I'm going to go to market with a bigger bang approach. And it seems like you've had success. So this is just very subjective, right? But I think it's interesting, very interesting.
Yeah, it's very subjective. That's a good point. I would say it's very difficult to build.
Yeah,
It's only I know what I have gone through. Everything is
yeah,
in the past. But the market needed an end to end. That's
yeah,
the whole point. The point is, but venture capitalists were not willing to finance that end to end. You have to build a big dam to
yeah.
actually reap the benefits.
That's right.
To build that big dam takes years and millions of dollars, and venture capitalists wouldn't see the ROI.
Well, they're looking at that 3, 5, maybe give you a 7-year exit strategy plan, and then it's like, all right,
And and to me that just doesn't make sense.
yeah,
Like this is a lot bigger. Just because trucking companies are not willing to pay a lot of money, that doesn't mean there's no other alternatives to monetize this
right.
product.
That's right.
Once you have that critical mass, you're able to monetize without actually charging more. I'll never forget this. I don't remember where I heard this. I think it was at one of the conferences where Amazon philosophy was everyone is trying to make more money by charging more. What we are
Yeah,
going to do, we're going to charge less and still make more money.
market share, make up for it. Yeah,
It's the market share,
yeah,
and I was thinking, okay, carrier is the most underserved market when it comes to software companies. Okay,
I would agree.
no one owns the carrier,
Right.
but they actually desperately need our help. They need
Yeah.
a lot of automation, and I was thinking, you know what? I'm not going to charge them a lot of money because I know they don't have a lot of money.
Yeah.
They run on thin margins.
Very thin, razor thin.
And
Yeah.
I'm not talking just those 5, 10 truck operations. I'm talking about 50 truck operations, 100 truck
Oh, the
operations.
whole industry. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like they, operate on thin margins. What I'm going to do, I'm going to prove that this technology is better than what's in the market. And because I was a carrier and a freight broker, and understanding what a carrier needs while they're growing, and one of the things that they need, and just to answer your questions, you kind of have to separate all the noise and see a clear path.
Yeah.
This is it. So one of the things that I built or asked the engineers to build was a hybrid architecture where you could operate as a carrier, yet
Mm-hmm.
you could actually be a broker,
Mm-hmm.
and you could have multiple P&Ls. At the same time, one employee could execute both strategies or both
Right.
businesses. So you don't have to, incur extra payroll to
Sure.
run the freight brokerage division and vice versa. But that's very difficult to do. How do you bring everything into a one unified dashboard yet maintain multiple P&Ls?
Yeah.
And so, but I had this conviction,
Yeah.
guys, this is what's happening in real world. Just because we're taught in marketing to be very narrow, have a niche, it doesn't make sense when it comes to logistics. And I am the example. I have shippers that are offering me a lot more freight than I have capacity, and I'm giving freight back because I don't have the right platform. I
Right.
don't know what the heck I'm doing when it comes to freight brokerage, and I'm going to lose money. And then I might not even track that outside carrier properly, and lose the relationship with my customer. So what do I do now? I'm not going to take the risk. So I'm essentially leaving money on the table.
Absolutely.
That
Yeah.
makes no sense. We need to become hybrid. The entire industry, especially when you're a smaller operations. When I say smaller, I talk about 300 trucks and less, or
Yeah.
or 5,000 shipments as a freight broker or less.
Right.
You operate in many instances. Shippers demand hybrid operations,
You
right?
bet.
Yeah. So if you have overflow freight, the shipper is trusting you. Go ahead and broker it out, but you need the
Right.
right platform to be able to broker it out properly,
That's right.
right? And so that's one of the key differentiators that I've built and went to market and surprised the market, because we're not
Yeah.
just freight brokerage operations or carrier operations, where you log in or log out, where you almost feel like these are two different platforms. The right hand
It's a unified operating system.
it's a unified operation. That's very difficult to build.
Yeah.
You just think about the type of integrations that you have. Think about
Oh,
how you pass on to visibility providers when you're a freight broker,
yeah.
yet you're a carrier. Two different tracking information has to flow. The difficulty level
Too
on the
much.
back
Yeah.
end
Yeah.
is enormous,
Yeah.
right? To a
Yeah.
point where engineers are thinking, "What are we doing?"
Well, and I'm going to go back to your earlier point, which I love, Nick, that in your experience, you've had the risk factor of customers you've worked with. And I think this is important for people to hear. They are apprehensive about firing or redeploying or reducing headcount because there's a fear of if this doesn't work, I got to go back to plan A, which is having the human element involved to make sure that I can sleep at night. Because if this thing goes haywire and I've let them all go, I'm really screwed.
Yeah.
So I think that's all this is just kind of reinforcing this idea that it's just these are monumental undertakings. And for what you and Alvys are doing of building a truly unified operating system in that hybrid model, wow, but I think you're going after the right segment of the market. I think too many vendors get their eye on the prize, and even the carrier world, right? You look at the top, what do they say? It's the mega fleets at aggregate still probably have maybe under 3% of the overall market, 2 to 3% at
Yeah,
aggregate.
but they
But they
control
haul
30%
much of
capacity.
it. Yeah, right.
Yeah, so it's
Right.
at the end of the day,
You got to read between the
yeah,
lines. Yeah,
because it's all about the truck. What's important is how many trucks are in your system, not
yeah,
necessarily how many carriers are in your system.
true.
Just because 90% of the carriers operate 6 trucks or less, that doesn't mean they actually control 90% capacity. They
That's right.
probably control less than 30 or 25% capacity.
Yeah, yeah,
So you kind of have to, segment those cohorts properly and deliver different solutions for different carriers. Our vision is really to have you grow, right? So if you
yeah,
have 10 truck operations, we promise that we're going to be able to help you grow to 20 much faster than if you do it yourself or with other platforms. We promise that we're going to be able to help you to go from 50 trucks to 200 trucks way quicker than
yeah.
you thought it's possible. And that's
Right.
our vision. So, but
Yeah,
when you grow, you need to redeploy different workflows. You need to graduate from small type of workflows into mid-sized workflows
yeah,
to larger workflows. And we've built all of those. And again, that's thanks to myself that was crazy enough to take the risks, and my wife still thinks that I like to self-inflict problems upon myself. Right now, she doesn't say that. The risk is in the past. But I honestly, at the end of the day, if you actually think about why it happened, I believe from the bottom of my heart, this is what needs to be done. And I
yeah.
went for it.
I love the conviction, love the passion.
Thanks.
Without that, I think if I'm writing checks from an investor or customer, I better believe in the guy sitting across the table for me. That and I think you just summed it up nicely. So, well, Nick, I don't want to keep too much more of your time, but we're in the sixth day of the new year. What can we look forward to from Alvys this year, and maybe and you as well, maybe. What's on the? I know you probably into year planning last year, some strategic planning sessions, etc. What can the audience and those in the industry that what are we look on the lookout for from you and Alvys this year?
Well, one of the key elements that we're building at Alvis is the ability to conduct business with each other while
Mm-hmm.
being a tenant. And we
Mm-hmm.
also funnel a lot of freight from different freight brokers that are not using Alvis. And
Got it.
that is to actually help carriers automatically plan for their future freight. And that's actually very big. It's never been done before. It's going to help carriers not necessarily let go of their dispatchers. It's actually going to empower them to do a better job,
Sure.
because they're going to be able to have the system funnel through thousands of shipments and identify the most optimal freight for the
Yeah.
given truck 2 weeks from now or 2 days from now. And that's how we're going to be able to help each carrier maximize their freight, while freight brokers are reducing their operational expense when it comes
Yeah.
to carrier capacity, uh,
Mm-hmm.
so on and so forth. So that's something big that we're actually gaining traction
Very
as we
cool.
speak. And I look forward to see what 2025 has in store for us.
Yeah. You have any market predictions? I think that's a lot of buzz on the pundits and those that there's no crystal ball, as we say, right? But are you optimistic that at some point in this calendar year that we'll see an uptick in the market and get out of this looming freight recession, I guess, that we've been in a deflationary market? A lot of variables we talked earlier, right? We've got a new administration coming in. We got questions around tariffs. We got the port strikes. There's a lot going on. Weather, right? Anything Nick, do you have what is your ideas on where this market goes? And again, it's all pure speculation, right? At least for me, I have no way to know.
I have this feeling that the industry as a whole has adopted more efficient technology
Yeah.
in the past 6 or 7 years, and therefore they've become a lot more efficient in their operations, which translates in more money in their bank accounts.
You bet.
Is the
Yeah.
reason why a lot of them are actually not going out of business as a lot of forecasters predicted.
Sure.
And the second component, the offshore nearshore phenomena has actually taken off big time, especially past the pandemic.
Yeah.
And that also is allowing carriers and freight brokers to have more money in their pockets.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's actually prolonging their bloodline, so to speak,
Right.
to
Right.
stay in business for longer.
Right.
Because our predictions were actually hinged on the fact of past cycles, but the past cycles never had the type of technology that we have in the industry today. And those cycles were before those cycles, the industry as a whole didn't operate with so many offshore, nearshore offices.
True.
These are two variables that are very different this time around.
I agree. I think it's good to put it in the context of the cyclical nature of any market, and trucking's no different, but just you nailed it, right? That we've this embracing mentality, and the new generations that are coming into this industry, right, often have to have interesting conversations with folks that are on the latter half of their career, maybe retiring in years to come, and try to, again, reconcile that with the new breed that's coming in that, was born with a smartphone and
Yeah.
are coming in expecting to have that same experience in their professional lives, right? And that applies to logistics and trucking, et cetera. So I think you're right. I think there's something there that and the acceleration of that, right? It's going faster and faster as every year goes on. And I'm, for my company and yours and other players in the space that are ultimately have this mission to make companies as efficient as possible, giving more money in their pocket. I think as long as we're unified in that stance, I think that there's going to be a lot of winners, Nick. I think there can be a lot of winners.
Absolutely. And just to kind of finish on my prediction,
Yeah.
if I look on last year's cycles, what happened in December and January, as soon as January hit, the freight market basically disappeared. Everything
Thanks.
went down. Whereas right now, you look where it's already been 1 week,
Yeah.
and the spot market is growing.
Yeah.
So something is different. Is it because of the weather? We don't know.
Yeah.
I want to say, give it another 3 weeks.
We're going to know a lot. I think
Yeah.
the preemptive mentality, right? If I'm a shipper right now, I need inventory level, safety stock. I need to make sure that if this tariff thing goes south, and who knows, it could be just posturing. That's politics.
Yeah.
But there's opinions on whether this, the ILA, the longshoreman strike is going to happen. So again, if you're in the supply chain ecosystem, there's a lot of unknowns, but I think, again, to your point, we're starting to see an uptick with spot rates, et cetera. And is that a blip? Is that an anomaly because of holidays and all these unknowns? But Nick, I'm with you, man. I think come into February-ish, maybe the next couple of weeks, I think we're going to have some more, should have a little more clarity around how some of these things are going to play out. But for right now, I'm hoping the market can take advantage of the volatility going on. That's just the nature of what we do. And I'm extremely excited and cautiously optimistic that 2025 is going to bring a lot more prosperity to everyone, because we've earned it, right? We've been dragged along the bottom for the last couple of years. So I think we're due for a nice uptick. But well, Nick, appreciate the time, man. I'm glad we got to have a real conversation. And am I going to see you at any of the upcoming trade shows, conferences, events? I'm guessing I will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably manifest.
You going to? I think I can tell
so.
you what. I think everybody that I talk to, it's kudos to the team over there that started this manifest idea. no more than 3-4 years ago, and now it's what 6,000 plus. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So I'll be there, and I'll be at some of the big trucking ones as well. But again, if anything, Nick, I'll see you in Vegas, I guess, for Manifest, which is just next month, right? So be here before you know it. Well, cool. I want to, again, thank Nick Darman, guys. I think he's a great guy. And again, if you're on the conference circuit like Nick and I are, then please make time to chat with him. Doing a lot of cool stuff over there at Alvys. And yeah, this is our first episode of the 2025 calendar year, Nick. So thanks for making the time on this Back to Work Monday. It's been a blast. And for everyone tuning in, thank you for the time today. The recording will come out, and we hope to see you in the future for, near future for another episode of Semi-Related, the podcast hosted by Optum. So for Chris Torrence, Happy New Year, everybody, if it's still safe to say that. And again, thanks to Nick for the time today.
Thank you.
You bet.